everybody, and welcome to our next installment of Table Toppers of the Month. This month, we are working on the table topper that is focused for Thanksgiving. This runner features a lot of basic quilting units. We have flying geese, half square triangles, and square and a square. So this month, we're just going to kind of review all the basics that there are to getting the best possible half square triangle, square and a square, and flying geese unit that you can. So we are going to start here with your instructions. Your cutting information on the inside of this pattern is correct. We have no notes for that, with the exception of they do have you in this pattern cut your binding at 2 1/4. If you prefer 2 1/2, you should have enough fabric in the kit remaining for you to be able to cut a 2 1/2 inch binding. We're going to start with a half square triangle unit. So in the pattern, there are a variety of different half square triangle units. There is a half square triangle unit that uses the beige and the red. There's one that has the cheddar or the orange and the red. And then there is one that has, where is it at? In this one, that has beige and cheddar. So there are 3 different variations of a half square triangle. And let's go ahead and work our way through how to make them. The one thing that I do like in the pattern is that they do have the half square triangle oversized so that we will be able to square it down when we need. We are starting with 2 3-inch squares of fabric that we are going to place right sides together. And I'm going to do it from the light side so that you can see. And we are going to draw a line from one corner to the other. I'm just going to use this line that we're drawing is going to be a cut line later down the road. So if you wanted to just pick up a number 2 pencil or a ballpoint pen that you happen to have laying there and not break out and find yourself the your marking tools, it'll be just fine. This is, like I said, going to be the cutting line after we do our sewing. Again, cut ourselves marked from corner to corner, and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. Let's go on over here to the machine and take a look. I have a 1/4 inch foot on the machine. However, on my machine, this 1/4 inch foot is a 1/4 inch from center to right hand side. It is not 1/4 inch from center to the left hand side. So I need to make sure that I am positioning this particular piece of fabric underneath this foot so that when I go to sew, I am sewing a 1/4 inch away. Now, as I've said before in half square triangles, we really want to be a little more like a scant 1/4 for this purpose so that we could make sure that we get actual size. However, since they have in the pattern oversized this half square triangle for us, we don't have to be quite as specific. Let me position this so that I can get my freehand system in here. I'm going to get my thread underneath the foot, and I'm going to line up the edge of my 1/4 inch foot with that marked edge. And I'm going to sew all the way down to the other end. And then I'm going to chain piece. So I highly suggest that you take and get all your half square triangle units matched, the lines drawn, so that you can just sit and chain stitch. When you get all the way to the end of all of those half square triangles that you need to do, I believe it is, according to the pattern, there is 16 of each color combination. I am going to rotate and sew down the other side. Now, once you have both sides of your half square triangle sewn, we are going to bring it back over to the cutting mat. Okay, so we're going to take these back over here. And we are going to cut directly on that line. So I'm going to line up to that line. I'm going to get my rotary cutter, which is always across the table from where I'm standing right now. And we're going to cut them in half. We need to get these to measure 2.5 inches square. And I'm going to show you a couple of different methods for squaring up a half square triangle. Lots of tools. There's lots of things out there on the market for squaring up a half square triangle. I'm going to show you first the corner clipper. This is the Creative Grids folded corner clipper that we can use to square up half square triangles. You can also use this to clip off folded corners, things along that lines. So we're going to use this to trim up this dog ear that we have here. I'm going to put my seam allowance right there on that line. I'm going to slide it down just a touch so that I have a little bit of fabric off the 2.5 inch line here, so that I'll have room to trim up the other side. And right now I'm going to trim across the top and down this edge. Then now we need to trim this side. So I'm actually going to flip this so that the edge that I just cut is down the bottom. We're going to line up that nice cut edge with the 2.5 inch line that's on the folded corner clipper here. And I'm going to trim across the top and down the side. Now, when I go to open this, I have an exact 2.5 inch square with no dog ears. Whereas, if we just took it from the way that we cut it and we folded it back when we cut it in half, we have these dog ears that are happening here. And we're going to cut those off. The next method, the next two methods are going to require us to open and press these first before we do any trimming. So with the folded corner clipper, we need to use them folded in half, not pressed yet, but we're going to get out the ironing board here. While I'm at it, they also have you press your seams open for these half square triangles in the instructions. Look at that beautiful half square triangle. Probably the easiest way to square up a half square triangle is with a folded corner clipper. Can't recommend it enough. The other ones I'm going to go ahead and press open before we do any trimming. Next up is a block lock. Now, this may be in your stash. You may come across this. They do a lot of shows and are in other stores. And even here at sometimes, a block lock has a groove kind of routed out inside of this that is designed to butt up against a seam. It's not as good for half square triangles that you need to press the seams open with, because you don't have a huge lip to be able to lock into, which is where the lock comes in block lock. But you just have to be a little more careful at that. So you're actually going to line that frosted line up with the line in the seam, and you're going to cut all the way around. Okay, this happens to be a 2.5 inch square. If it wasn't a 2.5 inch square and you have a larger block lock, you would slide that down, trim it to the size, and then rotate and do the same again. So I'm just going to rotate that. We're going to line up that frosted edge, and I'm going to trim off my dog ears and my corners and any little excess shavings, and we have another 2.5-inch square. The third and final way that I have to show you for squaring up a half square triangle is going to be using a good old square ruler. So for me, I'm going to put my square on the mat going from upper right to lower left, the diagonal line, and I'm going to match the diagonal 45-degree line that's on my square ruler over top of that line. Now, I like to use a square ruler because if you're using a rectangular ruler, the 45-degree line doesn't start in a corner. So you want to make sure it's easier if you do a square ruler. We can actually trim 2 sides at a time. So I'm going to make the diagonal line up with the seam going down the center, and we're going to kind of look at where the 2.5 inches lands. And at where I have it positioned right now, I have a little bit of fabric that I can trim off on the right and the top, and I still have a little bit of fabric that is extending past 2.5. And the goal is on the first cut that you want either to be directly on 2.5 or to have a little bit of fabric extra. And I actually prefer a little bit of fabric extra. That way, again, when I rotate this block, I will be able to trim some off the other side as well. I'm going to trim up and across. You may find if you're trimming a lot of half square triangles that a rotating mat is helpful because then you can just spin the mat versus picking up your block. I'm going to put the block back down, line up that diagonal line through the middle, and the 2.5-inch line goes directly on the nice cut corner. Now that I have a nice cut edge, I can cleanly line up that 2.5, and I can trim up the top and down the side. And I have another nice, clean 2.5-inch square. All the 2.5-inch square methods will work for getting these slightly oversized half square triangles squared down to the appropriate size. You cannot cut that 3-inch square, turn it into half square triangles, and then just immediately use it because it is not 2.5 inches. It is closer to 2 5/8, or it could even be smaller depending upon your seam allowance and pressing. So you're going to make 16 half square triangles in the 3 different combinations, and you're going to square them all to 2.5 inches with the seam pressed open. Now, our next shape is going to be a square and a square. And exactly as square and a square shows, it is literally a square inside of a square that we have done with using folded corners. So traditionally, the way that this works is we take 2 corners and we're going to do 2 opposite corners, and we're going to draw a line and stitch on the line and then flip the piece back. So kind of like the way that we just did with the half square triangle, we're going to do here. We can also go ahead, if you have your folded corner clipper, you can pre-cut that seam. So I'm going to line up this seam here. So 2.5 is across the bottom of my smaller square. I am going to cut that. And now all I need to do is sew a 1/4 inch away from that cut edge. I don't have to draw any lines. I don't have to come back here and flip and stitch anything. The biggest thing is you always want to make sure that you are trimming the right direction on the square and a square first. I'm going to sew here and I'm going to flip this back. Let's head to the machine. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch. And then we're going to flip it around and sew the other one. Once we have both units sewn, we are going to come on over to the ironing board. And we're going to flip the corners back and press the seams towards your corner fabric. Press away from center. Our goal is that our fabric basically replaces the corner that we cut off, and that the fabric sits even with the print. Okay, so like you just replaced that. We want it to be the right size. And then we're going to repeat this process in the other two corners. I prefer to trim prior than to sit and draw all those lines. It's just my preferred method. But if you prefer to place it in the corner and then draw the line and sew on the line, go right ahead. End result will be the same. You're going to need 8 square and a square units for this project, all of which are made out of the same combination of fabric. And then you'll need 8 square and a square units made out of another combination of fabric. So page 2 of your instructions will show you your fabric combinations that you need. And we're going to press this. You can use steam if you like, or no steam, it's your choice. And then you'll have your square in a square unit. This unit should measure 4.5 inches when you are complete. And I always measure, and I do need to trim and square things up here. You want to make sure that when you are trimming that you are 1/4 of an inch away from the intersecting point of that square. That way you know when you sew your seam, when you go to sew your unit together, you will have you won't lose a point. So again, you always want to make sure the distance from here to the edge when you are squaring things up is 1/4 of an inch. That is your square and a square unit. That will you be using for your table runner. Again, you have them this combination, and then in the other block, there's this combination with the red in the middle and the gold on the outside, and then gold in the middle with the red on the outside. Our next shape that we're going to review is a flying geese, or is flying geese, multiple here. This particular project uses a different method for making flying geese than you may have ever encountered in the past. We are not cutting individual rectangles and sewing flipping corners on the 2 corners of the rectangle. We're actually doing a method that allows us to make 4 flying geese at once, basically. Or 2 flying geese at once, but we're going to do this with 2 squares. So I have a square. I'm going to take so this would be the body of my flying geese. Okay, the body. These are my wings. So I'm going to take a square, I'm going to put it in one corner, and I'm going to take another square and put it in the opposite corner. They will overlap in the middle. That is the way we are going to take and draw a line from one corner to the other through those squares. Okay? Just like that. we're going to go to the machine. We are going to sew a 1/4 inch down each side of those squares. And I start on this side because this is the 1/4 inch side of my foot. Make sure that my lines stay lined up from one square to the next. We're going to flip that around and do it again. We're going to take this unit back over to the cutting table, and we are going to cut right down the middle. And we're going to make this really odd shape. We're going to make a heart. A lot of people refer to this method of making flying geese as the heart method. We're going to take our hearts, we're going to take them to the ironing board. We are going to press the seam towards the wing unit. Press a heart, basically. Take another wing fabric. We're going to put it in this corner. And we're going to draw a line from corner to corner. Right from the middle down to the corner of the flying geese body. And we're going to do the same with this one. So this unit's going to give us 2 flying geese, and this unit is going to give us 2 flying geese. So we'll end up with 4 flying geese total from that one square and 4 little squares. So 1 body and 4 wings. And we're going to pin that. We're going to come over to the machine and we're going to sew 1/4 inch down each side of those lines. Now, this method here is the biggest thing when you're trying to determine, well, Amy, what size squares do I need if I want to make flying geese this way for a pattern that doesn't make flying geese that way? The biggest thing that you need to know is what size does the flying geese unit need to be? And then you can figure out the math from there. And there are lots and lots of charts out there in the world, on the internet, to give you that math. So we've got, they are sewn a 1/4 inch on both sides. I'm going to come back over to the cutting table. We're going to cut down the middle, and magic is going to happen. Look at that. Boom. Flying geese with some dog ears that we've got to get rid of. We also need to verify and make sure that these flying geese units are going to be 1.5 by 3. So we're going to take the iron again and we're going to press and fold back. That will give you your 4 flying geese that we now need to get to measure 1.5 by 3. So you could do that with a traditional ruler, 1.5 and then by 3. But what's going to happen is you're probably going to end up ultimately trimming that point a little too close. So there are a couple of rulers out there. One, Creative Grid's Ultimate Flying Geese Ruler. This ruler walks you through all the math for flip back, for the heart method, as well as for this method that I don't like to do, so don't do this one. This method of flying geese gets you bias edges in the wrong places, so we don't want those. But what we want more than anything is this trim right here. Trim 2 on the Flying Geese ruler, we're looking for the 1.5 by 3. Okay, that is going to be there. And that is going to give us this little dashed line so that we can put that right at our point. We can also see where we are at the bottom of our Flying Geese and where we need to make adjustments, because then we can trim up and across, and then you can flip it over and again measure. We've got this line, we've got this line, and we can trim those. 1.5 by 3. There is also the wing clipper from Studio 180 Design, and the original wing clipper, or the wing clipper 1, because she has a couple of sizes now, has the 1.5 by 3. And again, the same unit. So this being 1.5 by 3. And this includes seam allowance. This ruler has the seam allowance in it. 1.5 by 3 is the finished size that's there. So it's actually 2 by 3.5 before you sew it. So the Creative Grids ruler works off of finished size. The wing clipper works off of unfinished size. So I'm going to line up the 2, this cross that you see, this darker X right there, that goes right at the top of where your fabrics come together, to make sure that you maintain and keep your sharp point. And then again, I can flip, can line up markings on the ruler, and then trim here. I have another 1.5 by 3 Flying Geese unit. So let me take a moment. We're going to trim these up real quick. Let me fix that pressing right there. I don't like the way that feels. I know we all collect rulers and things in our stash as we go around. We run across them in shows and kits and projects, and then we forget what we have, or that we have it, and or how it works. And so these are rulers that I would consider that you would need to definitely make sure that you had yourself a ruler that could trim half square triangles, and a ruler that you could use to square up Flying Geese, as pretty staple rulers in your collection that you have. And then we'll have our 1.5 by 3. You need to make 16 of these, and then we're going to take these, we are going to sew them together into 4 sashing units here, with all the geese pointing in the same direction, and we're going to be pressing those seams open. Now that you have your Flying Geese sashings together, we're going to work on constructing the 4 blocks. There are 2 different blocks, so you have block 1 and block 2. We're going to assemble them like they show in the instructions. You have this little 4-patch unit that you will assemble using your half square triangle units that you made. That should be a 4.5-inch square once it's completed. We're going to sew your rows together. Rows are going to be pressed top and bottom row seams go away from middle. Middle row seam goes towards the center. The next step will be to sew your rows together, and these final assembly seams get pressed open. So I want to show you something here to kind of help maybe make pressing easier. Have you ever tried to press a block and then all the other seams want to fold over and get in your way as you're pressing, especially when you're trying to press things open? This here is a seam roll. So it is basically a wool mat wrapped around a half circle. This will allow you to lay your seam up on it, and the rest of the block lays to the side. And this gives you access to be able to press that seam without running into your other units that are there. Great for pressing open jelly roll strips. It also helps to keep you from distorting strip units as well. So that is a seam roll that you're going to go through, and you can see, like I said, on that unit, top and bottom row are going out, middle row is going in. This will allow you to nest your seams at those major intersections, and then the final two seams for joining the blocks together are pressed open. And the same with the other style block. Now, once you have your 4 blocks made and your sashing strips, you're going to assemble the diagram, assemble your quilt top like you see in the diagram on page 5. And like we say, easiest part right here, putting it all together. So we're going to work through sewing everything together, pressing the seams as indicated in the instructions. The border seams I would press away from center as you are assembling. So if we take a look at the quilting for this particular project, a little bit more advanced than we have seen recently. She has a lot of custom work done for these particular blocks. So in this block with the black center with majority red here, we have some a block design in the center of the center block, and that is the same in all 4 blocks. And all the quilting is done identical in the 4 center units. We have some outline quilting that's done, and then another unit that is placed in the other large squares. The 4 outer corners are going to also get quilted with a design. You then have a design on the inner border, outer border, and a design in the cornerstone. This would be a great custom quilted project using clear blue tiles from Kimberbell, or using the embroidery in the hoop technique with templates and placing different shapes in different locations as well. The flying geese in the center are just quilted from one corner up to the midpoint and then back down. And that is done all the way across each of the units from the center out. And then once you are quilted, you can trim your backing and batting, bind your project in the manner of your choice. I want to thank everybody for joining us today as we assembled our Thanksgiving table runner. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section, and we will gladly help you along. And I look forward to seeing all your finished projects soon. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next month for our holiday themed table topper.